This panel discussion, the last for me, is going to be talking about, in our last panel today, actually, on cultivating spiritual disciplines. So we've talked a little bit about that with some of the people that we've had up here, but we're going to dive even deeper with this panel, and we have three or four questions from you guys as well that we're going to hopefully get some answers to here. So let me introduce our esteemed panel. First to my left is my friend Kelli Masters, who's an NFL player agent, the first woman to represent an NFL draft pick in 1997, Miss Oklahoma, also an author. Her book, High Impact Life, released back in 2021. Let's give it up for Kelli Masters. Next to Kelli is our friend Hans Malebranche. I had to ask him 4 times today how to pronounce that last name, and it's actually a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. Middle Tennessee State University's Associate AD for Development and Chief Development Officer. It's a big title, Hans. Since January of 2022, right? We also saw the video of Hans and his wife, which was really cool earlier. Prior to MTSU, he served as an Assistant AD for Development at Louisiana, where he assisted in the leadership, strategic direction, and management of an athletics development team. Brought in more than $47.5 million in gifts during his tenure. Give it up for Hans. And lastly, I figured if you just brought your NBA championship ring, Ryan, like that would be the introduction. Ryan Saunders, Denver Nuggets assistant coach, 2023 NBA champion, and there are people already clapping for him, which is great. Former head coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Let's give it up for Ryan Saunders. All right, so let's get into this. Let's start with Kelli. When did spiritual disciplines for you even be something you were aware of or thinking about on your journey with Christ?
I love that question. I was so excited when I saw that this was going to be the panel that I got to be part of. That changed for me the moment my ultimate goal in life changed. And I say that because we're in a room of pretty much, I'm sure every one of you all work in sports now, but you probably played sports or participated in sports, whether it was as a youth or all the way up through professional. And our goals dictate our disciplines. Our goal, whatever we're striving for, that's what we're focused on. That's what we're working towards. We find ways to discipline our bodies, discipline our minds, make sacrifices. And when I was, you've heard my story 1,000 times, but I was about 23 years old when I had my road to Damascus moment, when Jesus became real to me and I truly surrendered my life and my heart. And I look back on my life, I think I said, recited the sinner's prayer at Vacation Bible School for the first time maybe when I was 6. I was baptized when we joined a new church when I was 12. I had done all the check the box Christian things. I told everyone I was a Christian. But my goals in life had nothing to do with Jesus or with the kingdom. They were all achievement. And I talk about it all the time. When you're not driven by faith in your life, you're driven by fear. And I was so driven by fear my entire life that I just became an achiever out of a fear of failure. And so it was, what awards can I win? Can I be the best at my sport? Can I be the best in school? Can I please my parents, make everybody, and nothing wrong with wanting to be excellent. But my entire identity and worth was wrapped up in what can I achieve? How much of an audience can I have? How many people can be proud of me? And that can lead you to a really dark and empty place. And I did reach that place when I was, again, about 23 in the middle of law school. And I realized I had achieved all of my goals, so to speak, or so far. And yet I still felt completely empty, completely worthless, hopeless, and I knew something was missing. And I had always looked at being a Christian kind of like I looked at everything else in my life. I was going to have to earn it. I was going to have to achieve it. And so I never really grew in my relationship with Jesus because I didn't think I was worthy. I didn't think I was one of those super spiritual, talented, spiritual people. I just didn't think I was worth it. And I remember reaching out to a mentor of mine who had prayed with me and for me since I was 5 years old and had sowed seeds my entire life. And I reached out and said, am I eligible for grace? Am I eligible for a relationship with Jesus? Or have I missed it for too long? Have I been too far gone for too long? And I wasn't running around in crazy sin. I was living that good life, but my goal had never been about Jesus. It had always been about ultimately me, trying to make myself get as much attention and accomplishment as possible. And so the day I truly surrendered and said, Jesus, I love you. I want, God, I don't want to serve anyone else. I don't want to please anyone else. I just want to know why I'm on this earth. What is your calling on my life? What do you want me to do? And let me just do that. And as soon as that became the goal, that was the one singular goal when I laid down everything else that I wanted in life. And I just wanted to fulfill my God-given calling. It was nothing about me. That's when the desire for spiritual discipline just kicked in. Just like an athlete that's trained. All I could do was read the Word. I wanted to read the Word. I wanted to pray. I wanted to hear His voice. Yeah. I started becoming a tither and giver. I started seeking out mentorship coaches that could help me. And so that's where the discipline came from, this immense desire to fulfill the most important goal, which was to please God.
So good. Hans, how about you? About just the importance of spiritual disciplines and realizing that this is something you needed to instill into your life.
Yeah, I would just say, she said somewhere in there that your goals dictate your disciplines. And I felt like not enough people wrote that down. Right? Like, that's major. Your goals dictate your disciplines. That's so good. So for me, I got saved at 28 years old. Okay, so I had lived a lot of life before I ever even encountered Jesus. And when I had the opportunity to hear the gospel, it really challenged me. And I have a very unique blessing as part of my testimony, that the same person who shared the gospel with me is the same person who stood in the fire and continued to answer my questions when my curiosity had been piqued and I wanted a little bit more information and I'm not sure about this. Well, then when I put my faith in Jesus, that same person continued to meet with me regularly and disciple me and teach me about spiritual disciplines and teach me the difference between relationship and religion. Think about this. I'm 28 years old, right? So I had lived a lot of life. I had a lot of personality traits and just like ways of thinking about the world and processing information that I had developed already at that point. And biblical truth sits on top of most of that. Like, most of what I knew at that time was worthless in the grand scheme of things. And so there was a lot of unlearning that I had to do. And I kind of think about it like the operating system of my life, right? We're all Apple people here. So the operating, you can just tell there's
a few heathens here.
You can just tell. We're going to pray for them. No, before the end, we're going to pray for them. Hold hands and pray for you. Place hands on you. But like the operating system of my life had a virus on it. For 28 years, like, sin had corrupted my operating system. And so I needed to redownload, like factory reset, I think is what they call it. And I needed to be washed and I needed to be started all the way over. And so when God made me a new creation, right, at 28 years old, but spiritually reborn, man, how much don't I know? And I was very fortunate that God graced me with someone who was there to start feeding me right away. And so that's the long answer to the question is it became important for me right away because I had someone there in my life to help me understand, hey, this is important.
It's good.
Right? You talk about relationship is better than religion. Okay, well, how do I have a relationship with an invisible God? And I was very fortunate that I had someone in my life who helped me realize, man, look, it's really not that complicated. The same way you have a strong, growing, vibrant relationship in this world, right? You spend time with people, right? You listen to them, you talk to them, you ask them questions, you get inquisitive about them, right? You share your hopes and dreams and aspirations, right? There's this back and forth. One of the speakers earlier this weekend said that prayer is a dialogue, not a monologue. I was like, that hit me. that hit me.
It's good.
Right? And spiritual disciplines start with a relationship with Jesus, and Jesus will discipline you in the ways that you need it. Right? Because the way that you walk out your faith may be a little bit different than the way Kelli walks out hers, maybe a little bit different than the way Hans walks out his. Get saved at 23, get saved at 28. My wife got saved at 7, right? So like her walk looks different than mine. And there's some things that we both use, like prayer, reading the Bible, fasting, being so invested in our local church, like we talked about in the video. But like what that looks like and how it's applied, it looks a little bit different.
Yeah. Ryan, you're constantly pouring out to others as a coach. It can be easy to put your faith to the side. What are some things that your journey has seen and what it's been like to stay disciplined in your walk with Christ?
Yeah, I mean, for me, my journey has been a lot of ups and downs. And I've been fortunate that I think a lot of those ups and downs have been in the public eye. So with that, it's been opportunities for me to engage with others during those positive moments, me to engage with others during those negative moments. And it always comes back to, for me, how that's why one of the things too, I was like Kelli, I was excited to be on this panel, okay, with this topic, because to me, your discipline, that's something that you do, that should be an everyday thing. And for me, my discipline starts in the morning. Every morning I have to, get to my Bible reading plan. I have to get to my devotional. I have to pray. And then I need to pour into my family. Cause they pour into me so much. My kids, especially if I'm not on the road. But that's what fills me up. And with that though, I've learned that being disciplined for myself allows me, to not just be disciplined, within my relationship with Christ, but be disciplined in what I feel I've been called to do, and that's to try to pour into others. And I say that in a sense because, we can't always know the exact what somebody might need, or what somebody might be feeling in a certain moment. But I feel that if I'm disciplined in my walk with Christ, as disciplined as I can be, because if you were here last year, I talked a little bit about. I'm the first one to admit I am not a perfect Christian, and I would love to be, and I'm sure a lot of us in here feel the same way. And if you're a perfect Christian, man, that's awesome. I want to talk to you after this.
By the way, I haven't met one yet. 7 years of interviews.
Yeah, that's what I want to talk.
Anybody else perfect in here? Just checking. No,
that's what I want to holler at you. But it's I've learned that your calling might be, and timing, they might not match up to what you feel is right. And I say that in the sense of being back here in Minnesota. Love being in Minnesota. I grew up here. I played my college basketball here. My father was a coach here, for those who don't know, for a long time. I was fortunate to be an assistant coach with the Timberwolves, and then I was fortunate to be a head coach with the Timberwolves. And in that time, I remember I heard from some folks, as we're kind of in a transition development period with Minnesota, a lot of young guys, new draft picks. I remember there were some difficult moments, and there were some moments where I just think back to, I had my newborn son, and to give mom a little bit of a break, we decided to we lived in Edina at the time, and we decided to go to Jerry's, to the grocery store. And in that time, I got my list, and I'm struggling with this list, but I'm trying to make it. And I hear a grown man from, another aisle yell to me, "You need to win a blanking game." And this is during our season. And I was a little surprised, one, because I have my son with me, and two, because I didn't think that people, necessarily, like, if you wanted to say that, you can come all the way up to me, or say that when I'm not with my family. But in that moment, for me, bringing it back, my discipline started in the morning. I went through my devotional. I went through how I was going to treat somebody if I encountered a situation that maybe kind of jarred me or was abrupt for me. And I was able to just wave and tell them to have a good day. And I guess I think I'll try to kind of wrap it up here in a sense of, my dad, he, I think I told this story last year, but I'll tell it again for those who weren't here. But one of the most motivational Christian moments that I reflect on a lot was probably, I had to have been, I think I was, 20 years old or so. I'd really found my relationship with Christ. I was about 19, 20. I started seeing that it was not just me going to church. It was a relationship. And the thing that kind of put me over the edge with that during that time was my dad and I I was back from college, and he was in his off season, still coaching the Timberwolves at the time. And he and I went to our, local church. Mom and sisters had something going on, but he and I went, and church service, it's going to be a great morning, Sunday morning. Parked his car. There was an apartment complex across the street. And in that time, from our 45 minutes to an hour of being in church, his car got broken into. Everything stolen out of the glove compartment, whatever he had in there, any valuables stolen. And me, I'm a young kid still kind of working through my faith, working through what demonstrating faith in the real world looked like. I was, I'm like, how are you? He was unbelievably calm. I was like, how are you this calm? And his exact words to me were, we need to pray for them because they needed whatever I had in here a lot more than we needed. For them to do that while we're in church. And like that sticks with me. I think about that nearly every day because it just sticks with me so harshly in a sense of, to me, that's spiritual discipline right there, is knowing how to act in a moment of, being jarred, being something that was very sudden happening.
Good stuff, man. Thank you for sharing that. Got a couple questions from the audience that I want to get to. It asks, do you know of any head coaches who practice the discipline of Sabbath? And I'll add a little bit into that without just saying head coaches. It's like, nope. I don't think that was necessarily just for you, but it might have been. But I would venture to say, do you know any people that you've seen on your journey in sports that have practiced the discipline of Sabbath? Kelli, I'll go with you first, and then we'll just go down the aisle on that.
I just had one name pop into my head. Probably Tony Dungy.
I do, yeah.
Tony, and we talk about Sabbath. Sabbath can mean a lot of things to various people depending on what you've learned. But to me, Sabbath is rest, and it is setting aside time that is sacred, that is a time of rest. In line with exactly, how God's nature. God rested on the seventh day. Does that mean that we're all in sin if we're going to football games on Sunday? No, I don't agree with, or I don't believe that. And I don't know that anyone really can, but I think we do still, even if you have to work on Sunday, you do have to find a way at some point in the week to set aside. I was going to lift up my phone, set aside social media, set aside distractions, set aside work to the extent that you can, and really carve out time that is a holy time of rest and connection with God, so that you can be empowered to live for Him all the rest of the days. And I know, I don't know that I've ever had a discussion with Tony, but I know for a fact he carves out time at some point during his week that is very important for him, for his family, for connecting with God, and for honoring God's word. And to me, that's what Sabbath means, and he would be the one that I can think of.
That's a very good answer. I've heard him talk about that. Hans, Sabbath, rest, is that even possible? It's a discipline that God calls us to kind of walk with, but how have you seen that manifest in your life, or maybe some people around you that you've been with?
Sabbath is a choice. So it is very difficult in our line of work. I always tell people your day off is my day on, right? And so our events are happening on Saturdays and Sundays a lot of time, at nights and on weekends. But we also have the 9 to 5 portion of it, right? And the Monday through Friday stuff a lot of the time as well. But Sabbath is a choice. And I'm at a point in my career now, though my title is lengthy and my responsibility is high, like I'm not the guy. I'm not sitting in the chair. And so, like I take a weekly Sabbath, and that involves not only putting my phone down, but oftentimes putting it in a different room, to be honest with you, because I'm not that disciplined in that regard. And really taking that time to pour into my family, right? So we got a wife and 2 kids at home, and they come to a lot of Blue Raider events, and they love being around Dad at work. But man, when I'm at work, I'm not attuned to them. And so I want to make sure that when I'm home, I can be present and give them the gift of my presence, because it's limited. Even doing basic things like going to the grocery store can be really fun. But as far as like Sabbath, man, it's a choice. I'm in a position now where I can choose it, and there are not a ton of ramifications to that. My boss and my boss's boss, right? And like the presidents of our universities and the CEOs of our companies, like it probably looks different for them, but I'm not at that level. But to your question about coaches, Derek Mason is our new head football coach. And I'm not to say that he's the only person that does this, but I've never known another coach that did it. But he sent his entire strength staff home for the month of May, because that's the only time that they would get to really rest, to pour into their families, and to just, refresh themselves and get ready for a long, grueling summer and then a long, grueling season. Because in college football, especially at the D1 level, you just go from fall camp to the season, and the season to the bowls, and the bowls to recruiting visits, and then recruiting to spring ball, right? But in May, for the strength coaches, they could get away. And so he forced them out. They weren't allowed in the building. And so is that weekly? No. But I thought it was pretty dope.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty dope.
A whole month off. Anybody want a whole month off? We talk to our bosses. So Ryan, you were like, nope, no way. Can't even think about the idea of Sabbath as a coach. But why don't you expand on just what that even is in your line?
Yeah. I guess I'll rephrase that, because that's my initial answer. When you're looking at it on a weekly basis, it's very, very hard in coaching, especially as a head coach, to take a day off. There's no time off. The things that can happen, whether it be with your players, the unexpected events, those don't rest as much as we would love them to. But I think there's summertime right now. It does allow me to get rest. I love you all using the word rest in terms of Sabbath. Where we can kind of recharge ourselves as coaches in the NBA and in professional sports. As you all know, it's a year-round business now. And but there is more time to recharge, be with your family, get closer to Christ. Improve your walk in faith. But then also there's opportunities too where you're into a forced sabbatical in a way. And I look around the room a little bit because I locked eyes with Matt earlier over there, and a student I had, Isaac, around here, that I was in a forced sabbatical when I got fired by Minnesota, the Timberwolves, which at the time, as we've all heard, you may not know what I'm doing now, but one day you'll understand. Didn't know in the moment, why I was fired from the job that was my dream job, but looking back on it, I know it was because I needed a sabbatical. I needed to, not only was I, dealing with some grief within that time, having lost my father in that same position, I needed to take some time for that. God gave me what I needed. And then, I got an opportunity to, teach a class or do my best to guide a class. I don't know if I did a good job teaching it. I don't know if you learned anything, but at University of Northwestern for a year, and as part of my sabbatical. And that helped me walk in that was good for my walk with Christ. And that was good for my recharging myself to, Jason, your first question, how can I pour into other players? Which I feel is the ultimate calling for us as coaches.
Yeah, good reminder. He was coaching, then he was let go, then he was teaching a class, and then he was winning an NBA championship.
It's easy. That's just the path.
It just sounded what it was. So guys, write that down.
Why are you not write that down?
And do what you got to do. That's great. All right. So there's a couple more questions from the audience here. This was directed towards Ryan, but I'm going to ask it in a way where all three of you can answer it. The question is, how did you learn to find peace in the Lord rather than looking to find it in basketball? The question would be looking to find it in your job, looking to find it in your job, for you looking to find it in basketball. How did you find peace in the Lord instead of trying to find it in your job?
Yeah, I'm still working on it. And I think that anybody, once again, I think the word perfection is a word that is used in sports. I don't think it's a wrong thing. It's wrong to use that word because, hey, we should all be trying to achieve the unachievable, which I believe it is unachievable to be perfect, to be a perfect Christian, a perfect coach, perfect player, whatever that looks like, perfect, athletic director. But I also understand that, at the end of the day, if I can look myself in the mirror, if I can, pray and feel good about, what God what he was able to do in my life during that day was a win. Because, I think that especially, when I think back a little bit to, being a head coach in the NBA, you're not going to please anybody or everybody, let alone some days you might not please anybody. And I think you kind of have to just accept that. And then if you are thinking every day, hey, I'm trying to please this person, this group, that group, within the organization, especially as somebody who, can be looked at as a CEO of an organization at that time, it's impossible. You're not going to do it. And so I think it's about, developing that and accepting, giving yourself a little bit of grace, because I just think it's impossible.
Mm-hmm. Hans, how about you finding that peace in the Lord versus your job?
Jason, I think sometimes we overemphasize the cross. And what I mean by that is, for me and my experience, when I realized that Jesus not just died for me, but that he lived for me, man, that was a game changer. He lived 33 years, a perfect existence. I think it was Dayton earlier who was talking about how he was the greatest competitor to ever live, and he was the greatest leader to ever live, right? Like, there's so much value in what Jesus did when he was alive that I think just sometimes could use a little bit more emphasis. The cross is, of course, it makes all the difference, but man, he lived for us. And not just that he lived for us, but the way that he lived for us. If you just study the life of Jesus for a year, find a reading plan or a series of reading plans that just takes you through the Gospels, man, and just study the life of Jesus. There's so much in there. There's so much in there that for me has really been transforming, because he died so we could be forgiven, but the way that he lived reminds me that he also died so we could be transformed. You know what I'm saying? And we're new creations. If you're in here and you have put your faith in Jesus, you're a new creation. Okay? Like, you used to be a caterpillar, but now you're a butterfly. You know what I'm saying? Like, think about that. That's a completely different animal. Man, it was the same thing, but like, it's different. And Jesus did that for all of us in the way that he lived. And for me, the realization of that has been incredibly freeing and life-giving.
Yeah, it reminds me of, there's a line of a song, I can't remember who sings it, living he loved me, dying he saved me. Like, the living part is just as important as the dying in our walk. How about you, Kelli, finding that peace?
I mean,
you work in a crazy environment, by the way, where it's got to be so hard to find.
Crazy environment, but I always think back.
She doesn't have the transfer portal.
Kind of.
Now we're comparing crazy.
That's a whole nother conversation. No, I remember so well life like BC in my like trying to find peace and fulfillment in the world. And I went after the loftiest goals, and I had a solid resume. Like, I fought for so many goals and worked so hard. but I never could achieve peace because the world can't give us peace. And so the way I knew in my heart that I had been born again, filled with the Holy Spirit, that Jesus had become everything to me, is suddenly I had peace in every situation, even the horrible situations, the trials and the devastating. Sometimes things that are devastating. In the moment, it hurts so much, but immediately the peace of God that the Word says surpasses understanding is always present. I don't believe that as believers we should ever be hopeless. Ever. We have no reason to be hopeless. We can feel for a moment some pain, but to stay in a place of hopelessness is to not acknowledge the life or death or resurrection of Jesus.
Yeah, love that. Another question from the audience. The best tools and resources that you guys have used to help grow in your spiritual life. Could be something you're using now, could be a book you've read. What's daily time like? What are you reading? What's that look like for you? I'll go with Kelli and then down to Ryan.
I get so excited about this question. So years ago, when I first became a believer, which was now 28 years, that's crazy. 27 years ago, I still sometimes feel like a new believer that's still learning. Thanks. I was taught, I just want to know, how do I pray? I don't know how to do this. Like, teach me how to pray. And what's great is that's exactly what, the disciples that walked with Jesus said. They would see him get up early before the day started. He would go off, to the mountain or wherever. He would disappear for a while, and then he would come back, and then he would, preach, teach, heal the sick, cast out demons, perform miracles. And his disciples were all watching this going, what are you doing? Like, when you disappear every morning, teach us to do that. And you guys, if Jesus needed to get up before the day started and go pray and spend time with his Father, don't you think we need to?
Amen.
And so that's why I never beat myself up. I'm like, no, Jesus, who was all man and all God, still had to get up early and carve out time to spend with his Father before he could do anything. And so when the disciples asked Jesus, teach us how to do that, teach us to pray, Jesus actually said, and if you translate it, the Hebrew, it's pray in this manner, pray according to this diagram, this outline. And the Lord's Prayer is actually an outline that we can use to pray over absolutely every area of our being, of our lives, our family, our nation, our world. It is so powerful. And I love that Wayne started sharing that yesterday, that he uses the Lord's Prayer and that kingdom, he prays, that kingdom come, thy will be done. Every single day for 27 years now, that's one thing that I do not miss. I get up and I do my outline. And sometimes I can do the whole outline and I don't own the copyright on it. I will send it to anyone. It's a very in-depth outline that uses the word, that uses priority systems, that helps you to really order your day. And it's not just a bunch of reciting and talking, but it's a lot of listening too. And so I have followed that pattern every single morning. And I know that if I don't, my day will be completely off. I will miss things. I will miss revelation that God's trying to get to me. I will be disorganized. I just know. And the minute I realize that my day is not going well, I'm like, did I do my outline? Oh, no, I need to do my outline. And so it's just a practice that I have used, and every single person that I've shared it with has said this has transformed my prayer life. It has set the tone for every day. When you start your day in prayer, and when people say, well, how long should you pray, or how long should you spend time with God in the morning? Honestly, I look at when they were in the Garden of Gethsemane and Jesus had gone away and he was sweating drops of blood, and he comes back and he says, could you not watch with me 1 hour? Like, just 1 hour. 1 hour out of your 24. Could you not just watch 1 hour? So 1 hour is a good rule of thumb. Not everyone has an extra hour, but it's the most important part of our day. So spending time in the Word, in prayer. The other tool that I love to talk about is obviously spending time in the Word. And a great way, one of the best ways I've found, is to use the Bible app. And there's a plan that obviously uncommon. I mean, CWS, they're providing us tools through the Bible app, which I think is awesome. Find a plan that works for you. My favorite happens to be the 60-day journey through the New Testament. You can read the entire New Testament every 60 days, and that will transform your life.
I love it. Find Kelli after. Get that prayer outline, and she'll get that to you. Hans.
What was the question?
Tools and resources that you install into your life each day to make sure you're staying connected to God.
Yeah, man, y'all are not gonna like this answer. It's not that fancy, but man, you need Jesus. And you need your attention. Like, if you give Jesus your attention, that will transform your life. And I say that because, like, there are so many tools, books, podcasts, reading plans, Bible apps, Zoom, like, there's so many things, but many of them are devoid of Jesus. And so be careful.
Yeah.
I think it was Molly who said earlier, someone asked about her spiritual journey, and she was like, do you mean Jesus? Right? Like, that's important. There are lots of journeys. There are lots of pathways. Only one of them will take you to God the Father, and that's Jesus.
Amen.
So he has to be part of the equation. As far as how you connect with him, I spoke on this a little bit earlier, but it's a dialogue. It's not a monologue. So, like, at minimum, I think you need to have the Word of God, and I think that you need to be in prayer at minimum. And then what you add to that, beyond that, I've talked to people who take walks, and I talk to people who run. I talk to people who go into nature. I talk to people who do all sorts of stuff to connect with Jesus in a way that I can give you my attention. But in the story she told about Jesus, right, Mark 1:35 has been a transformative verse for me in my life. It says, very early the next morning while it was still dark. That's early.
Mm-hmm.
While it was still dark, the Bible specifies, Jesus went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Very early the next morning, it said, but if you read before that, what he was doing the day before and the weeks before was teaching and preaching and traveling by foot, mind you, healing the sick, right? Doing all of these amazing things. And in the midst of doing all of these amazing things, he prioritized getting up very early the next morning. But I don't have time. Look, you can get up very early the next morning and go off to a solitary place and be with the Father. And you know why that's so important? You keep reading that passage. You know what? Look, this is everybody's homework. Mark 1, y'all go read it tonight before you go to bed. Because after that verse, the disciples come and find him, and they were like, yo, where were you? We woke up in the house and you weren't there, and we came in and found you, and we need to go back to the city for more healing. There's more people have showed up. More people need healing. Now think about this. If you're not plugged in, what do? If you're Jesus, you go back, because healing, man, that's a good thing and that's a godly thing. And yeah, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do more healing, because why not? That's a really good thing. And people need healing and I want to be there for them. But what he said was, no. The Father gave me a new direction. We're not going back. We're going forward. And he took him to a completely different place. And it may seem on the surface and to your Christian friends, hey, why didn't you go back and do this thing, that you should have done? Well, the reason is because God told him to do something different. Right? And so we got to be plugged in to Jesus, because he's the only way to get to the Father, who's got something for you today. Yeah. Give us this day our daily bread. Like, what is your daily bread? Man, how are you going to know unless you ask? And then sit there long enough to receive it. Because prayer is a dialogue. It's not a monologue. Does that make sense? I know it's after lunch. Some of y'all are falling asleep on me, but for those who are still with us, does that make sense? Yeah. God's got something for you every single day. Every single day. And I promise you don't know what it is until you ask. You may think it's going back to healing the sick, but that was yesterday's mission. That was yesterday's bread. You going back to bite off stale bread to please people because you think that's what you should do, because someone told you that's what you should do. Meanwhile, God the Father is just sitting up waiting for you to come and spend time with him so he can tell you what he would like for you to do. because there's more work to be done.
Pastor Hans.
Seriously, right?
That's a good word right there. Ryan, I'll have you have the last word here.
Yep.
Some disciplines and some tools that you've installed in your life.
Yeah, no, I'll be quick here so we can move forward. But I agree with Kelli in the sense of, and I promise you, it's not sponsored. We aren't sponsored by Apple. This panel, but you know, I'm an iPhone user, and the YouVersion Bible app is big for me in the morning, and I say that in the sense of also with. I'm sorry.
It's on Android.
It's on Android too. There you go. Good. Okay, I got you. Good. I told you we weren't sponsored.
Is it on flip phones?
Not sure about that one.
Well, okay. I just checked.
But you know, I've always been an early riser. For those of you who have young kids or have had young kids, you know, it's sometimes early. Like your early is not even like you can't get to that early anymore because they have the idea of early being 4:45. So that means if you really want to spend, and I understand, I could be a better Christian. I told you I'm not a perfect Christian. If I get up at 3:45, that'd be much better. But I also need some sleep too, you know, during the season, especially when you finish your film at 2 a.m. You got to try to take care of yourself so you can pour into others.
Sure.
But so a lot of times my, you know, the convenience of driving into work and pulling up that YouVersion Bible app and listening to, you know, a devotional, a message, but then also being able to listen, you know, get to, you know, a Bible reading plan. That kind of sets me up for the day as a great tool. And then the other last tool, and I just kind of talked about them, but my young kids now are, and I'm not calling them like tools, but my young kids are, you know, I feel I have gotten better in a sense of walking with the Lord, trying to teach them. I have a 5-year-old, I have a 3-year-old. We've had to get back to basics. I still always talk, I will always, whenever I not involved, you know, obviously in faith, but sometimes I'll do coaching clinics. I'll talk about, you know, basketball, and sometimes people will say, hey, I'm just an elementary school coach. I'm just a, you know, middle school coach. I'm just a high school coach. And I always stop a coach when they ask a question, when they say that. I said, one, everybody's always a coach. And two, I think the best coaches, like NBA, we are not the best coaches in the world. I think high school coaches are the best coaches in the world because they're the best teachers. They have to teach from the ground level. They are the best coaches in the world. And I truly believe that. Now, there's other things that as NBA coaches, professional coaches, you know, we might have, you know, a good feel for because we've been through some of that. But the fact that, you know, I bring it back to my son, we're learning to pray at night. You know, I've prayed a lot, and now he's starting to do it on his own. And there's some nights where he says, you know, hey, how do I start? How do I start again? And I tell him, I'm like, buddy, you're just talking to God. You know, you can say whatever you feel, say whatever you want. He goes, I can say anything. I was like, yeah, well, not anything, but like you can talk to God right now. And that was a reminder, as basic as it may sound, that was a reminder to me of like, oh yeah, like that's what being a Christian is, because you're trying to teach from the ground level. And lastly, I'll say with that, you know, the other night, because he's starting to kind of wrap his head around that, you know, he has an angel grandpa now, you know, up in heaven. He hasn't met him, but he has an angel grandpa there. And so, you know, he had said, you know, hey, he started asking questions, and questions I didn't have the answers to. You know, hey, where is God? Where is, you know, I said, well, God's all around you. He's always with you, buddy. Like, well, where does he live? And, you know, you're trying to, so if anybody's got better ideas on how to explain, you know, let me know, because I'm trying to work through it. But I said, hey, he's up there. He's like above the clouds. I'm like, yeah, he's there. He's like, oh, so he's with Angel Grandpa. I'm like, yeah, Angel Grandpa's with him. And he saw me start kind of getting emotional because, you know, my dad, my best friend, everything. Now my son's my best friend and all that. But he saw me kind of get emotional, and he's like, hey, why don't we tomorrow, like, let's get a really tall ladder and go visit Angel Grandpa. And that right there, though, it's so sweet, so cute. I loved it. It was also something that, you know, like faith and God is everywhere. And my son, I feel he's such a gift from God because he was able to help rejuvenate me in life after my dad passing. And so for that reason, you know, I think he is a great tool for me, you know, just to try to work to become a better Christian on a daily basis.
It's awesome. Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of it's almost Jesus teaches for us to have faith like a child.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So when you're around a 5-year-old, you're like, oh wow, it's so simple and innocent. Why do we make it so complicated and so hard? And it's like, wow, we just gotta be so simple in it.
Just say whatever you want to him.
He can hear it. He can handle it. That's for sure. This was awesome. Kelli Masters, Hans Malebranche, Ryan Saunders. Thank you guys so much for doing this. Appreciate this.